Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to dive into how the open source AI ecosystem has completely transformed. Just a few years ago, this whole space was basically a niche sandbox for developers to play in, right? But by this year, 2026, it has exploded into a core pillar of global industrial strategy. So let's explore exactly how the power, the participation, and the technology itself have fundamentally shifted right underneath our feet.
Okay, let's just jump right into how we're breaking this down today. We've got 1. The open AI explosion. 2. A global power shift. 3. The rise of independence. 4. The licensing labyrinth. And finally, 5. Beyond text.
First up, Section 1, the OpenAI explosion. We're looking at how this went from a total niche to an absolute corporate standard.
Check this out. By late 2025, the platform Hugging Face hit a jaw-dropping 13 million users. But what you should really take away from this isn't just the sheer size of that number, it's the velocity. That figure literally doubled within a single year. It signals this massive, rapid acceleration in ecosystem engagement that goes way, way beyond just casual experimentation. And that insane growth totally highlights a major shift, right? We've moved from just consuming AI to actively creating it. The community isn't merely downloading pre-trained models anymore. They are building on them. The platform is now sitting on over 2 million public models and 500,000 public datasets. It's basically evolved into this giant collaborative engine of derivative development and fine-tuning.
But time for a quick reality check. Because even with millions of models floating around out there, the ecosystem is incredibly concentrated. I'm talking about a tiny, tiny sliver, just the top 200 models, which is literally 0.01% of the platform, accounting for basically half of all global downloads. On the flip side, half of all the models on the platform have fewer than 200 downloads total. So the real power and utility, it's highly centralized in just a few foundational architectures.
Now, because these top-tier models are so incredibly reliable, they've completely changed the game for business. Open source AI just isn't an experimental side project anymore, it is a rock-solid corporate dependency. In fact, as of 2026, over 30% of Fortune 500 companies are actively relying on these open ecosystems, maintaining verified accounts to build out their own internal tech infrastructure. Moving right along to Section 2, a global power shift. Let's talk about the geographic rebalancing of AI. If you look impartially at the raw data, a huge defining metric of 2026 is China officially passing the United States in ecosystem dominance. Chinese model families, think Alibaba's Qwen and the DeepSeek models, are now pulling in 41% of all downloads. This is a major strategic shift. Developers all over the world are actively choosing these models because of their extreme efficiency and top-tier reasoning capabilities. And these staggering download statistics are fueling something really fascinating, this global push for sovereign AI. Basically, nations are waking up and realizing they absolutely cannot afford to rely on foreign cloud infrastructure for something this vital. Governments are now treating AI as critical national infrastructure, and they're investing heavily to make sure they control their own domestic models.
You want a perfect example of this in action? Look at South Korea. Back in 2025, they aggressively named 5 national champion models to kickstart their domestic scene. Fast forward just a few months to February 2026, and 3 of those totally homegrown models were trending on global leaderboards all at once. It just proves that aggressive localized investment can rapidly yield world-class AI.
All right, Section 3, the rise of independence, or as I like to call it, the era of the small workhorse.
Take a look at this timeline, because this is a wild reversal. Before 2022, the big, major industry labs were completely running the show, leading roughly 70% of all model development. But by 2025, their share basically fell off a cliff, dropping to just 37%. Who took over? Independent and unaffiliated developers, who now actually drive 39% of all downloads. These grassroots developers are steering the innovation now by heavily optimizing base models and redistributing them to the masses. And the actual size of the models they're using tells a really fascinating story. On the top row, you've got these massive frontier models, like Kimi K3, sitting at a staggering 2.8 trillion parameters. Now, it's true that mean size of downloaded models has risen to about 20.8 billion parameters lately, but look at the bottom row. The median downloaded model across the entire ecosystem, it's a highly relatable 406 million parameters.
So the crucial takeaway here is that these smaller, deployable workhorse models are what everyday developers actually use. They fit on a laptop, they're cheap to run, and they are highly specialized. But they require constant updating. The average lifespan for a hot new open model at the top of the charts is roughly just 6 weeks before it gets replaced by something better. This is exactly why organizations that iterate relentlessly, like DeepSeek with their V3 and R1 drops, are absolutely dominating the space.
Which brings us to Section 4, the licensing labyrinth. We're looking at open source versus open weights.
So as independent developers and huge enterprises adopt these workhorses, they're stepping into a massive legal minefield. We really have to cleanly separate two concepts here. On one side, you have true open source, like Apache 2.0 and MIT, which is legally clear and commercially safe. On the other side, you have what we call open weights. These are custom corporate licenses like Meta's Llama or Google's Gemma. They're marketed as open, sure, but they're heavily restricted by complex terms of use.
Let's break down why this matters so much. Apache 2.0 remains the undisputed gold standard, used by about 39% of all models. But custom licenses? They introduce serious friction. I mean, Meta slaps a 700 million monthly active user cap on Llama. Google's Gemma requires flow-down obligations, meaning you have to police your own users for them, and they reserve unilateral termination rights. For an enterprise procurement team, these aren't just minor details, they are major contingent liabilities.
So, to clear up this immense corporate confusion, the community rallied behind the OSAID 1.0 standard. This standard explicitly defines true open-source AI as requiring full disclosure of not just the model weights, but the training data and the code used to build it. Custom open weights models totally fail this test, and this completely explains why enterprise teams are strongly preferring true Apache 2.0 models, like Mistral Small 3.1, where the legal risks are practically zero.
Finally, let's zoom all the way out for Section 5, Beyond Text, Science, and Robotics, the physical frontier.
Guys, the sheer explosive trend in robotics right now is staggering. We saw robotics datasets on Hugging Face skyrocket from just over 1,000 in 2024 to nearly 27,000 in a single year. Think about that volume of data for a second. It actually bypassed text generation to become the single largest dataset category on the platform. The open source community is literally mapping the physical world.
And this proves that physical AI, like robotics and physical sciences, is the absolute fastest-growing sub-community out there today. Open models are moving from our screens into our laboratories. We are seeing these massive coordination efforts where hundreds of independent contributors are pooling their resources to tackle incredibly complex things like protein folding, drug discovery, and molecular dynamics. We've seen how open-source AI has totally disrupted software, centralized corporate power, and even global geopolitics. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I want to leave you with one incredibly exciting question to ponder. As this decentralized power leaps out of the server room and into physical robots and medical laboratories, how will it reshape your daily reality?